All right, so by this point, you should have Python installed on your machine. And so what we're going to do in this video is run Python and write our first Python program. So if you're running a Windows machine, you can do it the hard way, and that's to click on this little Windows window icon thingy. And then, of course, your screen is going to look different than mine, but eventually if you keep scrolling and scrolling, you'll get to Python. Now, in this course, we're running version Python 3. So if yours says 3 and the numbers afterwards aren't so important, but as long as it says Python 3, you've got the correct version and you're going to be fine. Python 2 is an older version, and if you're running anything with the Python 2 version, things might look a little different than what we're doing in class. So you want to make sure that you're running Python 3 and like I said, the numbers afterwards at this point really don't, it's just different iterations of version 3. So as long as it's Python version 3, you're going to be fine. And then if I click on the little drop down, what we're going to be working with is idle, and I'll explain idle in a little bit. But for now, that is what you could click on. So mine says idle Python 3.6. That would be the correct one. That's a lot of work. Obviously, you could put a shortcut tab on your taskbar here, or just type in idle, and it should come up. So different ways to get to it. But regardless, that's where we're going. So when you open up idle, right now we're getting what's called the shell. So this is an interactive shell. This is kind of unique to Python, but here we can see that I'm running Python 3, so I've got the right version, and we see these 3 greater than signs. And what this interactive shell does is gives us the ability to just put in one statement or ask Python to do one task, pretty much. So in other words, we're going to write our first print statement. I'm going to print parenthesis, and I'm just going out of the example of the book here, so game over. And just for the moment, you can see that when I hit the enter key after my game over parenthesis, the word game over actually printed out. And so what we've got here, and we're going to elaborate on this quite a bit more as we go along, but this is our way. Print is what's known as a function. And so that simply means that Python is going to do something for us. We don't have to understand how it knows what to do. We're just going to call somewhere out in the big world, there is code that knows how to print whatever is in this parentheses. Okay? So print whatever's in these parentheses to the console. And so that's in fact what it did. Notice that I put my game over in quotes, and we call this a string. In other words, we're asking Python to print whatever is literally within this string. So if I put, for example, print, and I didn't put the game over, notice I get an error. I get this big red nasty error, something's not wrong. So what we need to learn right off the bat is if we want to print a string or something like a sentence or something literally to the screen, we're going to have to put that in parentheses and then put it in quotes. So what you're also starting to see here is this interactive shell is giving us the ability to make sure that we follow the rules or the syntax of Python. In other words, if I don't put this in quotes, I got an error. Invalid syntax. Python is saying, I don't understand what you want me to do because you didn't follow the grammar rules properly or the syntax rules properly. I use the word grammar because we think of that in English, but the programming version of that is the word syntax. We had a syntax error. Notice the color, the different colors. That's not just to make the screen look pretty, even though it does. The colors are trying to give us an idea of what the words are. In other words, the purple is indicating just what I said, a Python function. So that's something that Python should recognize and therefore is in purple. The green is our literal string. So anything that we use as a string is always going to be in green. And then the output is always going to be in blue. So that tries to give us some kind of visual cue whether we've done something correctly or incorrectly. For example, here we can see that since we didn't put this string in quotes, we even got this text was in black. When we put the quotes, the string in quotes, we got the green. So that gives you some visual clues on, did I do this properly? Let's see. Let's also recognize that if I typed print with a capital P, does that work? Oh, I get this really nasty, lots of scary looking text. So all this is trying to let us know is this is the file that's running, and it's just currently this shell, as we call it. So in this Python shell, on line number 1, we saw the interpreter is trying to let you know that on this line, this is the line that caused an error, and this is trying to give me an idea of what that error is. Now, this isn't always correct, but it does its best to give us some kind of clue. In this case, it's saying print is not defined. In other words, I can't find a function named print, but we saw that function up here. We know that there is such a thing as print, but we're case sensitive. Python is case sensitive, so it doesn't recognize the capital P. So as we progress, these error messages can be pretty helpful, but pretty scary at first because that looks like a whole lot of, oh gosh. But we'll keep trying to get comfortable with those, and the more you read them and just get used to them, the better off you're going to be in the long run. So we get some kind of feedback as to what went wrong. So now when we put it in correctly, game over, then everything should print out properly. Yay! Well, writing this is great. We're writing one line at a time, but that's really not how programs work. Programs constantly are doing things, not one line at a time, and then I have to put in another statement or another command. And so what we're going to do is play with Python's idle, which is its editor. So if I click on File and choose New File, I'm going to get this. This is an editor. So this is going to give me the way to save the file and make edits or make more than one line, that kind of thing. So let's just run with it and see what that means. So right off the bat, I'm going to save this file. Notice I couldn't do any saves here. I just did line by line in my interpreter. But in idle, I can file, save. I'm going to save it to the desktop just so it's easy for me to find in this examples. And we're going to call it sample, or I think I've already done a sample, so I'm going to do game over.py. Okay, save that onto my desktop, and let's see, it showed up on my other screen here, so let me pull it over so you can see it. Let's see, where did it go? Okay, so game over.py. So notice that our extensions, the ending, the dot extensions of our file is called py. So that's how the computer will know what type of a file it is, so it knows what application to run in order to execute that file. In other words, if you had a Word document, its extension was .doc or docx. So Python's is I think you maybe can't see that. Oh, it won't let me pull it down. Why won't it let me pull it down? I'll hold it down for a moment. So it's gameover.py. It pops up because I have that on automatic, but not important at the moment. All right, so here is our file, and we're going to do exactly what we did before, where we did some printing. Okay, so let's print print. See, notice the coloring again, and we'll do it properly with our quotes, our string, game over string, and we have to make sure we close our parentheses. Now that we've saved it, we're going to run it. So in order to run and actually see it, last time we just hit the enter key, but now we want to run all of the statements in this file, and so we're going to choose F5 or run module. It's going to give us this little prompt. Did you want to save that? Is it okay if I save it? Yep, that sounds good. And then we can see that it restarted it, and there's our game over just like we expected. So let's go through our errors like we did the last time. What if I left off the open, let's say I accidentally left off the closing parentheses. So I have the opening parentheses, but not the closing parentheses. Let's see if this will work. Like I wasn't really paying attention, or similar to leaving a period off at the end of my sentence in English class. So must be saved, yes. And see, this is where sometimes it can get a little confusing. Unexpected EOF while parsing. Well, that's spooky. I don't really know what that means. So that's why I say sometimes the errors make sense and sometimes they don't. So you have to just sort of do your best guess and try and figure things out sometimes, and that can be a little frustrating. But it's also a good learning tool. So I can see that I've got this big red line here. This is where Python felt like, oh, I got stuck right here. And then I can look back at it and say, oh, right, I forgot my closing parenthesis. And now I can run that and save it, and everything worked out fine. So just off kind of a side note, I get tired of answering that save okay. So what you can do, if you don't like that prompt to be constantly there, I can go into Configure Options, Configure Idle, and then under this General tab, there's this option right here that says Autosave Preferences. And so it's saying that when I hit that F5 key or choose Run from my menu, here's where it says go ahead and prompt to save, and then this time it'll say no prompt. Well, it's kind of leaving me up to me to save it, but that's okay with me because I get tired of that prompt. So that's up to you if you want it or not. I don't like it, so I'm going to say, please don't prompt me. I know I'm supposed to save it, and you're good to go. Okay, so what else have we got here? Well, let's say let's go through some of the examples we did before. Let's do a capital P. Remember, that's Python is case sensitive, so this should generate an error. We got that error when we did it over here. So now I'm going to click on, notice that the text is also black. It should be purple, right? Because I want it to recognize that that's a Python function, just like it did over here. So that should give me a visual clue right off the bat that I've kind of messed something up. But let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. And it gives me that scary error message again, but it's really not that scary. So here, it's letting me know what file it's running. It says on line 1 in the module, and we'll talk about modules way on later in the course, so don't worry about that word for now. Here's on line 1 what I found, the interpreter's trying to tell you, and it's back to that error message, print is not defined. And so then I can go, oh, that's right, it's supposed to be lowercase. So sometimes you get an error message like we did here, where we just got this syntax error message, or sometimes you might get what's called a compile error, and we'll talk about that all later, so I don't really need to worry about that, what that means right now. But the bottom line is, oh, I have it correct. It would have run it here like it did here. So you might get errors in 2 different formats when you're running it from the from idle. Okay, let's see, what else can I share with you? Maybe we want to print game over on 2 lines instead of 1. Okay, so I'm going to do a print here. This space is optional. You don't have to leave a space. To me, it's just a little easier to read. So now let's see what happens. Notice this gray highlighting. Again, that's idle, trying to help you out to say I see an opening and closing parentheses. So to idle, it's trying to let you know, it's giving you that visual clue that this should be a complete, that this is syntactically correct, that we've got a complete opening and closing with something inside of the parentheses. So that's good. So I'm going to run that. Now notice I have game over on 2 lines. So each print statement wrote its own line. So that's good information. All right, so I'm going to go back to this little icon that I had on my desk. So again, it's a .py file. That extension lets the Windows operating system know that this is a Python file, and that's associated with our Python interpreter. So if and I know you can't see it, but I'm going to double click on it. Oh, what happened? I got a black screen and then it went away. Wait, try it again. Maybe I made a mistake. I'm going to double click on it again. Oh, did you see that black screen that disappeared? So what happened there is both of these prints ran in what's called a shell, and then it disappeared. It didn't know to stop and wait for anything. In other words, let me just demonstrate that with code. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to copy and paste because I'm lazy. So I'm going to put this word, here's a new function. Notice it's in purple, and this is an input function. An input tells Python to wait at the console, and you'll see this work in a minute. wait at the console for the user to put in something, and then proceed. So it's sort of like a pause for us in the moment. And so in my string, what I remember is string, so within the quotes, literally what I want written to this console is going to be press the enter key to quit. And this /n/n is simply make a new line. We'll talk about what this all means, what that slash means and slash later, but for now, it's synonymous to writing this print statement. So I could do the same thing by doing print. I could do the same thing, just so you know. I could do a print and then leave a blank, okay? Or, so it's just putting a blank line in between the console. So that's kind of, those both are the same thing. So I'm saying create two new lines, okay? Similar to hitting just the enter key in Word. And then this is a command for the user to see, and then wait for them to enter it. So if I run it from here, I'm going to save this. If I run it from here, I will see, notice the blank lines. That's the /n/n that you saw. So it created two /n/n created two line returns. Press the enter key to wait to quit. And so if the user, technically if the user puts anything in, but if they hit the enter key, notice this ends because of our greater than signs. And then we're returned to whatever it is we were doing. All right, so now let's run this double click. So remember this little icon we had on our desktop with the .py? Now I'm going to double click on that, and you're going to see this information was actually sent to the command shell, to the command window, and it's doing the same thing. So press the enter key. So now we're actually running this program. So you could give this to, you could give this exe file to your folks or email it to them and say, hey, look what I did in class today. I'm a programmer. Okay, so hit the enter key and then that screen goes away. So by putting this input, we effectively, remember before, I'm going to remind ourselves, oh, I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to tell you what this is. This wasn't really intended in my thought, but I'm just kind of rolling with it. So this hashtag simply says, this is something I want to keep in this file, but I want Python to ignore it. So don't do this line. Just ignore this line, but I don't want to delete it. I want to save it for later. And remember that if we didn't have this input sign, I'm just using this for demonstration. If we didn't have this input and I double click on our little icon, again, that little black screen went away. So this just enabled us to hold on to that screen so we could see the results. So if I save this again, I took off that hashtag, so I says, please don't ignore this line anymore. Go ahead and actually run it. Did I save it? Oh, I don't remember. I was so busy yapping. Here we go, save. And now if I double click on this .py file, okay, I think you get the idea. So let me acknowledge comments, that little hashtag, because comments are very, very important. So I'm going to I'm just going to write this out. My name is Kirsten Markley because I'm the coder. I'm the author of this code. The name of this file is Game Over. That's the name of my program. And then I'm also going to put something like this program, we'll do program, generates, what shall we say, a string to the console. There we go, or prints, whatever. Okay, so when we're talking about comments, again, we've used that hashtag. This whole line of comments is ignored by Python, so Python isn't going to actually run it. But remember that this is the human readable version of this code. And so we use comments so that when other people read our code, they have some kind of clue as to what the code's doing. We also use comments to explain what certain chunks of code is doing to make it easier to maintain for the future. And that's something we'll learn a lot more about later. But it's really good practice to get into in the very first program, writing your comments. So for your first assignment, I will be looking for comments that have your name, the name of your program, and what your program is trying to do. Okay. So I've commented my code. I have a function that's purple that's sending a string to my console. And then I'm using the input function to hold on to that black console, console window, so that I can have the user be able to see what was, remember before, without that, it disappeared, the window disappeared. So this holds on to that window so that we can see the results. And then later we'll actually use input to get information from our users, but we'll deal with that in another session. But for now, that's our first program, and your first assignment is to pretty much do the same thing, where you'll be generating a line of code that has your favorite quote. You'll be generating a line of code that has the author of that quote, and then you're creating a file, like this one is gameover.py, and you'll be uploading this py file to Canvas for your assignment. So that's our first program. Welcome to CIS 120.